My favorite memory is when we came back and beat Perry in overtime. Funny thing that happened to me was when Nolan impersonated Coach Peterson after a big win. And a piece of advice to pass on would be don't take anything for granted and that high school goes fast and love every single moment.
This is Greg Campbell. My favorite memory of the year was when seeing the excitement after each win and each victory throughout the year. The funniest thing that happened to me was on my first day and the first day of team camp, we ran a screen pass, and I, as the cameraman, got knocked down behind the play. One piece of advice to pass on to the underclassmen is to make the most of every day. You're going to have bad days, make the most of it, and try and take one victory and one success from each and every day.
My favorite memory is running out of the Ploy Bear Head against Akron East in week 1. The funniest thing that happened to me is when Ethan Reckenbach hit the gritty during a big game. Piece of advice to pass on to the underclassmen is to hit the weight room.
My favorite memory was being able to come back for the Hoover game and play in the rivalry game. The funniest thing that happened in football this year was watching Nolan Foster impersonate Coach Pearson after a big win we had. And a piece of advice I'd pass down to underclassmen is to have adversity. You just need obstacles to be thrown your way. You just got to be the kind of person to overcome those obstacles as a person and as a team.
My favorite memory would have to be all the times we went out to eat after team camp and two-a-days. The funniest thing that happened this year would have to be all the dance parties after each and every win. Piece of advice I have to the underclassmen would be live in the weight room, and your 4 years here goes by really fast, so cherish every memory.
My favorite memory would have to be Warner Wednesdays. The funniest thing to happen to me in football would be the Glen Oak game, getting punched in the face a few times. The piece of advice to pass on to my underclassmen would be to take the hard practices and then to don't miss out on the easy practices.
This is Dom DeAngelis. My favorite memory is beating Berea Mid Park in the playoffs. The funniest thing that happened to me in football is during practice, I saw Coach Bud doing snow angels in the grass. Piece of advice to pass on to leave to an underclassman is that don't take it for granted. You never know when your last game is going to happen and when you can't put the pads on again.
My favorite memory was getting told to purposefully hold junior year during Perry Week and getting to just hug people and fall. That was the most fun thing in the world. My funniest thing had to be watching Jaden Mauser RKO another player Friday night. And my piece of advice is nothing is worthwhile unless it means pain and difficulty.
My favorite memory was beating Perry in overtime. The funniest thing that happened this year was probably Nash laying the hammer on Laterulo in practice. A piece of advice I would give the underclassmen is don't take it for granted because you'll miss it.
I'm Connor Jeffries, and my favorite memory was probably when we played Perry my junior year and we scored 56 on them, all rushing touchdowns. The funniest thing that has happened was probably our conversation after the game of Glen Oak, our junior year as well. And then a piece of advice to pass on to the underclassmen is probably just take the coaching or stick with the gym. It works.
My funniest moment would have to be the dead raccoon that was on our sideline during the Akron East JV game my junior year. My best memory is probably beating Perry in overtime this year. And then piece of advice is just work hard every day. Don't take anything for granted. It does go by kind of fast.
My favorite memory is sitting in the training room and talking after each game. The funniest thing that happened, well, not to me, but is when Olivia got hit in the face with the football on the sidelines. And a piece of advice is when you're riding in the gator with Trish, hold on.
This is Julian Acosta, and my favorite memory is probably going out to eat on Saturdays with the team. The funniest thing that happened to me in football was Galen swim moving me. One piece of advice I'd like to pass on is learn your plays and execute.
My favorite memory is beating Berea Mid Park in the first round of the playoffs. The funniest thing that happened to me is when Nolan did his impersonation of Coach Peterson. And one piece of advice I'd give is just don't take coaching personal and just use it to get better every day.
My favorite memory is him, Ben Hosafel, come back from his injury week 10 and playing. Funniest thing that happened to me in football is when Coach Foltz hit the gritty after the JV team went undefeated. And advice I give to the underclassmen is make the most of your offseason and get better.
This is Ethan Lesko.
My favorite memory comes from all the times we got to go out to eat as a team. The funniest thing that happened was when Nolan gave his Coach Peterson impression in front of everybody after we beat Central Catholic. And one piece of advice is to enjoy every moment you get out on the field and with your teammates, because you don't know when it's going to be over and when you're going to have to stop playing.
All right, my favorite memory would have to be when we beat Lake my junior year. Nico Paxos hit a game winner. The funniest thing that ever happened to me was against Akron East. On the fourth play of the regular season, I got a holding call. A piece of advice I'd like to pass on to underclassmen would probably be make the most of your opportunities.
My favorite memory this year is probably going to Buffet Dynasty after all of our team camps and two-a-days. The funniest thing to happen this year was probably wrecking ball hitting the gritty after we beat Akron East. And my advice to the underclassmen is just to take the gym seriously in the off season.
My favorite memory was beating Perry in a close game in overtime. My funniest memory was watching Nolan do an impersonation of Coach Peterson. And my piece of advice would be to never give up and never back down from any challenge.
My favorite memory would be beating Perry in overtime this year. Funniest thing that happened to me would be watching Nolan impersonate Coach Peterson after a game that we won. And a piece of advice to pass on would be don't take anything for granted and work hard every day.
My favorite memory is probably beating Strongsville in the playoffs last year. The funniest thing that happened to me is probably Rechtenbach hitting the gritty. And then a piece of advice I would leave would be work hard every day because you don't know when it's your last.
This is Jaden Helfenstein. My favorite memory would be winning my first playoff game against Mid-Park. Funniest thing to happen to me in football was Coach Skaggs' hand signal video during team camp. And a piece of advice I'd give would probably be just to cherish every moment and don't take it for granted.
This is Galen Koseski. My favorite memory is definitely beating Berea Mid-Park in the playoffs. The funniest thing to ever happen was Nolan's impression of Coach Peterson after the Central Catholic win. A piece of advice I'd like to pass on would be to live in the present. Don't look forward because time flies.
My favorite memory was winning a playoff game. My funniest thing that ever happened to me was Coach Skaggs' hand signaling video. And my piece of advice would be work hard, just keep your head up and keep going.
My name is Ray Wilson, and my favorite memory was the game versus Perry when it was 4th down, and it was the last play of the game when we went for the 2-point conversion and got it. The funniest thing to happen to you in football, my funniest memory is seeing Nolan Foster imitate Coach Peterson. It was like it was his little son. It was funny. A piece of advice to pass on to lead to the underclassmen is to give it your all and leave it all on the field. No matter the results, you won't regret leaving it all on the field.
My favorite memory is when we won against Perry in overtime. And the funniest thing that ever happened to me in football is when Nolan did the Coach Peterson impression. And a piece of advice I'll pass on, to work hard every day. And things will start to get rough, but keep your head up and make yourself better every day.
My favorite memory from the season from playing football at Jackson is when we beat Green last year and Sonny blocked the field goal. Funniest thing that happened was going out to eat with all the teammates, going to Kintaro, drive up there, drive back, going to Dick's just all the time in Fairlawn. And piece of advice for the underclassmen is to take coaching. I've gotten reamed out a lot during my time here, but just keep taking the coaching. They know their stuff, and you'll get better.
My favorite memory in football ever was watching Ben Hozoffel walk back on the field after tearing his ACL. The funniest thing to happen to me in football was when Nolan Foster gave his Coach Peterson impression in front of the whole team after a big win. A piece of advice I would give is that even when it seems difficult, try as hard as you can every play, because that's what the coaches will notice.
My favorite memory would be the Perry game this year. The funniest thing that happened to me was freshman year when Ben Holzoffel slammed his helmet into my back at halftime of the Central Catholic game. My piece of advice to leave to the upcoming class would be to take every day of practice like it's full contact.
My favorite memory is beating Berea Mid-Park in the first round of playoffs. The funniest thing that happened is Nolan's impression of Peterson. My advice is to never take anything for granted.
My favorite memory is freshman year receiving my jersey once I moved to Jackson.
Funniest thing that happened to me in football, honestly, it's probably just in the locker room, having fun with my friends and dancing after a win. And then, piece of advice I would like to pass on: don't take these moments for granted. You only have so much time.
This is Nick Zito, and my favorite football memory is getting an interception in my very first game against Akron East this season. The funniest thing that happened to me in football was in team camp watching Coach Skaggs' signal video. And a piece of advice is to practice every day like it's your last, because you never know when that's going to be taken from you.
My favorite memory was running down the field on the opening kickoff against Akron East. My funniest thing to happen to me was after the wins in the locker room, seeing everybody dancing. And one piece of advice I'd pass on would be to don't be discouraged, always believe in yourself and keep your head up.
Favorite memory would probably be our first playoff win last year against Strongsville. Funniest thing would be Nolan Foster's impersonation of Coach Peterson. And what I would tell the younger kids coming in is don't be late, don't slack off, and make sure you're really paying attention to everything you're being taught, because there's a lot of information that gets thrown at you all at once, and if you don't pay attention, you won't understand what you're doing.
My favorite memory from playing football probably has to be beating Strongsville and Berea Mid Park for our 2 playoff wins. The funniest thing that ever happened to me came my first lift as a freshman. Me and my buddy were loading the weights on, and I wasn't paying attention. I was trying to look at the chart to try to see what amount we had to put on next, and he was unracking the weights, and I wasn't, and the whole thing tipped and almost took my foot off. And I just remember Coach Rohr looked at both of us with this just absolute hilarious expression on his face, like, what are you guys doing? And that leads into my next point when it comes to a piece of advice, which is just hit the weight room as much as possible, watch film, and try to get big over the off season.
So my favorite memory in football is running a lot of gassers. It just kept me active and whatnot. The funniest thing that's probably ever happened was, well, there's a lot of things, but just mainly getting put on my butt and then getting laughed at about it. But I mean, it's whatever. And then piece of advice for the underclassmen: don't quit when it gets hard. You know, the tough times only last for a moment, but it's worth it in the end.
My favorite memory would be Warner Wednesdays. The funniest thing that happened to me was during the McKinley game when I pancaked a kid and stood over on top of him, and he punched me in the nuts. And my word of advice is to always take the coaching, because they ultimately know exactly what they're doing.
Huh? 50-30. Ladies and gentlemen, we are Warriors. We are going to wrap up and we are going to tackle. You understand me? We are going to tackle. All right? I can do this.
Dear Mom and Stepdad.
Dear Mom and Dad.
Dear Mom and Dad.
Dear Mom and Dad.
Dear Mom and Dad.
Dear Uncle Mike. Dear Mom and Dad.
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 Dear Mom.
Dear Mom and Dad.
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 Dear Grandma and Grandpa.
Dear Mom and Dad.
You gave up your time.
Season after season.
Countless hours are spent
in the car bringing us to
Practices, games, and tournaments.
It's not always easy.
We tested your patience over the years,
but you always remember
that water bottle.
Our cleat we kept forgetting.
Working in the concession stand.
The fundraisers
might not be your ideal Saturday afternoon or night.
But you are there with a smile on your face.
You brave the unknown
of what is in our bag.
After a full day of training.
And somehow the next day,
our clothes and equipment is clean
and ready to go like it's magic.
We may not say it enough,
but thank you.
Having you on our sideline
and cheering our name
makes all the difference.
You have the front row seat
to see us win,
lose, get knocked down,
and stand back up.
Your love and support seemed at times
to make all the difference.
Sometimes you got a little intense at games,
but you can't help it. You just want to see us win
because you are our biggest fan.
Thank you for all that you have done
for us over the years.
Go Bears, love Keaton.
Go Bears, love Greg.
Go Bears, love Des.
Go Bears, love Ben.
Go Bears, love Aaron.
Go Bears, love Colton.
Go Bears, Love Dom.
Go Bears. Love Ethan.
Go Bears. Love Luke.
Go Bears, love Jeffries.
Go Bears. Love Andrew.
Go Bears, love Ava.
Go Bears, love Joy.
Go Bears, love David.
Go Bears, love Jaden.
Go Bears, love Ethan.
Go Bears. Love Wiggy.
Go Bears, love Dane.
Go Bears, love Alex.
Go Bears, love Brody.
Go Bears, love Max.
Go Bears, love Jaden.
Go Bears, love Galen.
Go Bears, love Jagger.
Go Bears, love Ray.
Go Bears, love Mason.
Go Bears, love Jason.
Go Bears, love Ricky.
Go Bears, love Garrett.
Go Bears, love Sebastian.
Go Bears, love Ken.
Go Bears, love Nick.
Go Bears, love Ryan.
Go Bears. Love Skylar.
Go Bears, love Rex.
Go Bears, love Maxwell.
Go Bears. Love Justin.
Only took 19 tries.
It was that hard. That was horrible.